My name's Adam Melnyk, leadership coach and owner of Seeing the Lead, and today I'm going to teach you all about the art of agreeing. One of my biggest pet peeves is the fact that leaders refuse to agree with people. And usually this comes from a place of ego, it could be stress, it could be an agenda. It doesn't really matter. The crux of the issue is that leaders feel like they need to know it all, they understand the issue better than somebody else, and they feel that they don't need to agree with the other person because their opinion is the only opinion that matters. And I find that incredibly frustrating. For example, when I worked as an employee, I remember going to my manager and saying, I feel incredibly isolated here at work. I just don't feel as connected with the people around me or the job that I'm doing. And my manager said to me, how could that be? You can't be isolated. We have team events every week where you're always talking to your team members. Like, that's just not a thing that I'm seeing. And I became incredibly frustrated in that moment because she simply wasn't listening to me. She didn't agree with me on anything. And ultimately I felt that we were on opposite sides of the ballpark. And I didn't feel like I could come to her with my problems. And ultimately, I was taught through that interaction, don't come to my manager with problems. Don't talk to my leadership. They're not going to help you. And that was incredibly frustrating because as a leader, your job is to build bridges. Your job is to point out the similarities. Your job is to understand the other person's points of view, help them come to the table, and work with you to solve the conflict. That is your job as a leader, is to build the bridge, extend the olive branch to the other person. And the easiest way to do that is simply to agree. Just agree. It doesn't matter what you agree on as long as there's something that you agree on. For example, I remember working with a lawyer and he said to me, oftentimes he has a witness on the stand that can be quite cantankerous, frustrating to work with, that is disagreeing with this lawyer all the time. And I remember talking to this lawyer and I said, well, how do you work with that individual? How do you find that middle ground? And they said, well, what I do is I ask a question that both parties can agree on, such as, we both can agree that the sky is blue, correct? And the cantankerous witness would say, yeah, the sky is blue. It's like, awesome. So we can agree on something. Now, and then they would ask their next question. Sometimes agreeing is as simple as finding the most common of middle grounds for both parties to create a community of us, not an us first them. Because in leadership, our power comes from the ability to get others to act on our behalf. If the other person feels like they're on the opposite side of the fence, if the other person feels like there's no middle ground, guess what? They're not going to act on our behalf, which means that our power is diminished, it's reduced. And ultimately, if nobody wants to act on our behalf, then there's a big question of, are you a leader? Are you even a manager? Should you be fit for that role? Which is why it's critically important that we find the similarities. For example, I remember working with a gentleman and he got very frustrated with me and he said, Adam, you're just a prick, you're stuck up, and I hate working with you. And I said to him very poignantly, yeah, I can be a prick at times. I understand how that could be frustrating. I don't agree with this whole sentence. He was clearly attacking me, but by simply reflecting back his words, showing that I heard him and agreeing on something, I started to diffuse the tension from that statement. And that gentleman that I was working with, I had to find multiple grounds of similarities, things that we could agree on before I could build a working relationship with him. And that's just it. When somebody says something to you, our job is to look for what can we agree with. Another great example is this manager that I went to and I said, I feel incredibly isolated and alone. I feel very disconnected from my team members and I feel like I'm just disconnected from my work. To simply agree would be to say, yeah, I can see why you feel disconnected if you're feeling isolated. That's all we're doing. We're just agreeing. And it allows the other person to be heard, to feel seen. Which is why it's important that when we're looking to agree with the other party, we work from a place of curiosity, understanding where they are coming from, to take ourselves and leave it at the door. It's not about our thoughts, our opinions, what we think is the solution. No. When we're agreeing, we're listening to the other person strictly. And when we're listening to the other person, it's looking for the one thing that you can agree on. Many of my coaching clients come to me and they say, there's nothing that I agree with the other person. And I said, that's because you're not listening. And typically in my coaching calls, I'll have to sit with my client and break down what the other person is saying to find the one thing that they can agree on. Because ultimately, if we can agree on one thing, we can agree on another thing, and then ultimately we can create conflict resolution. One of the most fundamental skills I always encourage my leaders to develop is a skill called reflective listening. This is where we're not changing or altering a person's statement, we're just reflecting it back to them. For example, I once had somebody come up to me and said, I have so much on my plate, Adam. I'm incredibly stressed out. My wife is divorcing me. I'm getting written up at work. My friends are having problems with their marriage. I think I might have some health conditions that are going on, and I just don't know what to do. And reflective listening is not changing anything that they just said, but ultimately reflecting it back to them, which is as simple as, that's a lot on your plate. I can see why you're stressed out. All we did was we took what they said and reflected it back to them. It is a critical skill for all leaders to learn, to start building that bridge, to extend the olive branch so that both parties can come to the table, so that we can overcome conflict management, so that we can solve problems. If you want to learn more about reflective listening, come sit down for a free 4-week coaching session where we can get into the nitty-gritty of reflective listening and how you can use it to move up to the next level. If you found this video helpful, give it a like, subscribe, and share it with somebody who you think could use this information. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.